What you see here is a bird's eye view of how some are trying to keep the homeless crisis away from where they live and work. Dozens of these bright red planters strategically placed to prevent people from turning sidewalks into tent cities. But those with these barriers say the city of Los Angeles is punishing them while at the same time allowing the homeless to illegally block sidewalks with tents. NBC4's I-Team investigator Joel Grover tonight reports on what some call a dangerous double standard.
A homeless tent goes up in flames near downtown LA. Just down the block, another tent fire erupts, right next door to the uniform company owned by Rick ANTMAN.
I worry about the safety of my employees greatly. They're like family to me.
ANTMAN says 3 years ago, homeless people began pitching tents in front of his business, Clean Craft Uniform Services, blocking the entire sidewalk and violating disability access laws. He says every day he found used needles and people defecating in front of his building. So he put up this fence to keep the tents away. That is, until the city ordered him to remove it or face a stiff fine that could exceed $1,000.
I thought, why are you coming after my fence when there's tents blocking the sidewalk? Illegally.
The Bureau of Street Services has refused to give ANTMAN a permit to keep the fence. Will you issue a permit to someone who wants to put up a fence just to keep tents away from their building?
If you're putting something on the street just purely to keep the homeless off the sidewalk, would have an issue with it.
But you could easily assume the city has no issue with the thousands of tents that now impede access to LA's sidewalks, like in front of Lisa Rich's building on East 7th. Have you ever seen the police come by and say,
Never.
Move your tent?
Never.
The city ordered Rich to take down this fence she put up after a homeless tent caught fire, damaging her building. And fences aren't the only barriers going up. These makeshift planters line the 800 block of South Hope Street, placed there by business owners trying to keep away tents, like Maria JANOSSY.
We had to take matters into our own hands because the city was, again, dropping the ball on us.
Maria and her husband Peter run this nonprofit and say it's unfair for the city to penalize people who are trying to protect their properties.
I think it's a double standard, and they are going after people who obviously can pay the fines.
Do you understand why the property owners feel like they're being held to a double standard, a higher standard than the homeless who block the sidewalks?
I understand that. Ending homelessness and dealing with the homeless individuals are governed by federal laws, court orders.
It seems like more and more property owners are now taking extreme measures to keep homeless tents away. Like Steve CASTRO, who put up these trees across from the apartment he owns after an encampment took root just a few feet away.
A lot of kids were walking by, and one day one of the homeless guys was playing with himself while looking at the kids, and that was it.
Castro says the trees pushed away the tents, and he says the crime that came with it.
There's no needles, there's no one fondling themselves, and the kids are safer.
The city of LA says it began a new program this month with new guidelines to consider allowing people to put up fences or barriers to protect their properties. The city says it will allow barriers, especially if they beautify a property and allow sidewalk accessibility, and not just to keep the homeless away.
NBC4 is committed to covering this crisis, the homeless crisis, with our Streets of Shame series. And if you have a story idea, we'd like to hear about it. Just send an email to tips@nbcla.com.